So you hear so much in the news about the homeless challenge in California, what's true, what's not true. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. So let's get to it. Welcome to the Living in Oakland, California channel. I'm Rich Fleming, your local realtor, and I'm here to teach you everything you need to know about living, working, playing, sleeping, eating, whatever in Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay. I get a ton of people reaching out to me with questions about how to relocate here, what it's like to live here, what they need to know before they get here. I absolutely love it. That's why I do these videos. So you know what to do if you got questions. Drop me a text, send me an email, give me a call, because when it comes to helping you relocate to Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay, I got your back. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about a subject that pops up in the news pretty frequently, and that is the Bay Area's homelessness challenge. And it pops up, what's true, what's not true, all the hype and everything else. Well, I'm going to really break down what the challenge is overall, what is the cause of the challenge, and some of the things that are being done to try and address the challenge. So let's just jump right into it. Now, in a recent point in time survey done by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, in case you're not familiar, it is a federal agency. They did a point in time study survey, and they estimated that there were about 161,000 homeless individuals in California. And to give you a sense as to the scale and scope of the size of that challenge in California, that represents somewhere between 25 and maybe as high as 28% of all homeless people in the country. So California definitely does have a homeless challenge. There are a number of reasons. I'm going to talk about some of those, but there is definitely that challenge. But don't think it is a challenge that is limited to just California. You are starting to see these challenges, and you do see these challenges anywhere where it is a high cost of living situation. So you have pretty significant challenges in the New York City area. You're having greater challenges in Texas because it's becoming higher cost of living area. Anywhere where the cost of living is increasing, you're seeing more and more homelessness. But there are a couple of factors that are kind of unique to California, and we'll talk about those as we proceed. Now let's talk about a couple of the stereotypes that are out there about the homeless. And a lot of it is, it's just people who suffer from drug abuse, alcoholism, which is a drug, or they're just lazy, just mentally ill, what have you. There are a lot of stereotypes out there. There are definitely a significant portion of the homeless population that does suffer from these challenges, but there are a lot of people who are not falling into those stereotype groups. Somewhere between, depending on what survey you believe, somewhere between 10 and 15% of people who are homeless work full-time. They just can't afford housing, and for whatever reason, they have lost their housing. You probably have about 10% of homeless who are veterans and have suffered various challenges related to that. And then you have about another 10% of homeless who are young adults who are just 18 to 24. They are not necessarily the chronically unhoused. They have just transitioned and found themselves on the street for whatever reason. So it is a wide diversity of people who find themselves in the position of being homeless. So over the last decade, the number of homeless individuals has increased by somewhere around 22 to 25%. And there are a number of drivers that have contributed to this dramatic increase. And these drivers pretty much fall into three buckets. So let's talk about those. So the first one is pretty obvious in California, and that is the cost of housing. The cost of housing in California is really one of the drivers of many of the challenges the state faces, and it's one of the top priorities that the state is trying to address. But by many estimates, California is about 1.4, 1.5 million housing units short of the demand that's out there. And anytime you're in a situation where the demand exceeds the supply, you get rapidly increasing prices. And that's what has been experienced in California for the last 10 to 15 years, definitely. So how does that excess demand affect people who could become homeless? And what that means is that not only are home prices increasing rapidly, but so are rental prices. And California, especially the metropolitan areas of Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange County, the greater San Francisco area, a significant number of people who do rent spend over 50% of their income on housing. And that 50% mark is considered very financially tenuous by experts. It does not take much of a financial uncertainty or hiccup to cause someone to fall into homelessness because they can no longer afford to pay their rent. You could be in a situation if you're paying 50% or more of your income in rent, where if you were hospitalized just for a week or two, or could not work for a week or two, that could easily cause you to financially spiral and end up homeless. That happens to a lot of people. So the second factor is policy. And that policy is often portrayed in the media as crazy political positioning where, yeah, homelessness, no one cares. Come here, live here in California, be homeless. We're not going to do anything, we don't care. Well, that's not really the truth. But there are many policies that have been implemented, there are laws that have been implemented, and there are attitudes of actually citizens of California that have really caused some of these problems to get worse over the last couple of decades. So to touch on a couple of these, the first is the actual ability to build homes. And there's a lot of stuff in the media about how hard it is to build homes in California and all the red tape, and that is true. The state is trying to work on it to make it somewhat simpler to build housing, but it is not as simple as finding a lot and building homes in California. But the other aspect of that, and the aspect that often isn't talked about, is NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Because of many of the urban areas have significant populations, there has been a significant no growth attitude of many people in the greater Bay Area and in many parts of California. And what that translates into is people pressuring their representatives, both locally and statewide, to restrict housing development, anything that's going to bring more people to their area, make traffic worse in their area. And thus, you have not seen a lot of housing development over the last 2 or 3 decades in California, which has led to that 1.4 million housing unit shortage. Now, the problem with NIMBYism is, yeah, it's great. You can prevent the building, but you cannot prevent people from moving here or the population from growing. And that is what has happened over the last few decades in California. The population continued to grow, but the housing didn't. And now we are facing some of the problems that we are. And one of those problems is homelessness. So a second factor that has made addressing the homelessness challenge that much more difficult is how to address the needs and the rights of those who have mental health challenges or may have dependency challenges. What has happened over the last 30 or 40 years in California is that those who are not a danger to themselves or to other people cannot be forced off the streets, quite honestly, and into programs or into housing, what have you. And that is due to a law passed under the Reagan administration when he was governor of California, and that law is called the Lanterman-Petris-Short Act. And what that act did was essentially made it illegal within the state to forcibly incarcerate or institutionalize someone who had not committed a crime. And why this law was passed is, if you look into the history of it, there were some outrageous abuses of the system to incarcerate people indefinitely for no reason other than they may have had some mental health challenge or be poor or just have an alternative view of the world, but had not actually done anything. But there were some horrendous abuses of the system, of the mental health system, before this law was passed. But what has ended up happening since the passage of this law is now it has become increasingly difficult to address the needs of those who cannot take care of themselves. As long as they are not a danger to themselves or other people, there is really not a whole lot the state can do right now. So a third component to the homelessness challenge in the state is pretty much geography and also kind of this attitude of many people in the state regarding homelessness. One of the things about California is that it does have a very temperate climate pretty much throughout the state year round. And that attracts a lot of people, and even those who have more challenges try to migrate here because it is just an easier place to live. You are very challenged to be homeless in Wyoming in the wintertime. You can do that in Los Angeles. I'm not saying it's easy, but the weather and geography just make it much simpler to survive here than in many other regions of the country. Another component is in California, people don't really consider homelessness a crime problem. Yes, homelessness can be associated with crime, but it is not a criminal activity per se. So it is treated differently than it may be treated in many other parts of the country, but that is also a situation that is somewhat changing. People do want the problem addressed. The real question is how to do that. So I've talked about the size of the homelessness problem and some of the causes for that problem. Now let's talk about some solutions that are being considered and being implemented within the state and the Bay Area. So first and foremost, let's start with housing. So in recent years, California, the state, has really implemented some new laws and requirements to make it easier to build housing. Now, I'm not going to say it's like really easy to build housing in California, but it is easier than it used to be. And some of these laws include making it easier for people to add what's called an accessory dwelling unit, a small house on their property. They have made it much more difficult for most cities and urban areas to restrict new housing development. So that is essentially to kind of address NIMBYism. Oh, we don't want any new houses in our area. It is too crowded already. Well, the state is really cracking down on that because people are moving here, or people have moved here, and the housing is needed. So that is one aspect that has been, in the works, but that's not going to solve the problem immediately. Now, the second thing the state is doing is coming up with ways to address the needs of those who have mental health challenges or dependency challenges. So what is being considered, and it has not been implemented fully yet, is changes to the conservatorship laws in California. And conservatorship, if you don't know what that is, that's essentially when an individual or the state can take legal responsibility for another individual. And that often happens in situations where people are mentally incapacitated or aren't capable of taking care of themselves. There are a number of proposals that are working their way through the state government to change conservatorship to make it easier to get those who cannot or do not take care of themselves off the streets. And that is one of the biggest challenges right now because there's no legal mechanism really to do that in California right now. Now, the real things that are of concern is to make sure that these laws aren't, once again, used against the poor, used against those with alternative views of the world, making sure there's a good checks and balances. But there is a strong push to make sure that those that aren't taking care of themselves or can't take care of themselves aren't on the streets. And a third solution is just some alternative housing that many cities are considering. So a lot of cities are building or have built or planning to build essentially tiny homes, alternative living structures. Everything from using shipping containers and converting those into homes or building little homes that are fully self-functional in order to give people a space to live themselves but not be on the streets. And this is really taking form, especially in cities like LA, San Francisco, Oakland. It is becoming more and more popular, but once again, it is just starting and it still has a long way to go. So as you can see, the size, the scope, the causes, and the solutions for homelessness in the Bay Area are significant. It's not something that's going to disappear overnight, but it is a problem that is being addressed, and the state and local governments are working on addressing it. But the hype that you hear on the news, that you step in dog or human feces everywhere, that they're homeless everywhere, that the state's out of control, That's not the truth. You do not, the whole state is not packed with homeless people. There are 40 million plus people in California, and there are about 161,000 homeless people. That is a significant number, and I don't mean to minimize their challenges, but statistically, that is not like everyone everywhere is homeless, and the state's completely out of control. You will see homelessness, especially in some of the major cities, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, LA, so on and so forth, but it is not an quote-unquote out of control problem everywhere. Get that out of your mind. So another video I did that addresses myths that you often hear in the media is this video. I think it'll pop up over here, or maybe it's over here, I don't even know. But it addresses 3 myths and 3 truths about East Oakland. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up button so YouTube knows to show it to other people with interests similar to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you know each and every time I drop a new video, and I'll catch you in the next video.